Welcome to our weekly Ask Strong Towns Anything conversation. Norm, our usual host, is in Pensacola right now for a conference. But you've got me and Edward hanging out. We did have some pre submitted questions, but also really wanted to talk about this new housing toolkit if people have had a chance to see it. I will get you a link to it if you haven't seen it. And I'm just letting the people in. But yeah, Edward, do you want to offer any like opening comments? Since I'm not seeing the people who submitted the questions in here,
Yeah.
let's talk about housing toolkit first. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to make sure everybody has gotten a hold of the link. We'll drop a link in the chat. I've got a link too. But yesterday, just so that you know, all 7,000 members of Strong Towns, as being members, you received the first access, the first draft of Housing Toolkit number 2. If you go back and you remember or think through what we had with the first Housing Toolkit, we've focused on the first housing toolkit on code reforms, on things that cities could do to help make housing, more housing opportunities, allow cities to say yes to those. So, allowing rear yard cottages, allowing starter homes, allowing duplex and triplex and fourplex units by right in communities. If we go back to the components that were outlined in that housing toolkit, there were some really interesting things that came out of it that's worth sharing with all of you because I know that many of you are in the throes of all of this. So, housing ready toolkit, 6 things. We ask all you to go out there to your cities. You can still go to the housing ready site and take the test. Many of you did this. And as a result, we had 60 or 70 cities all across North America fill out, and they identified that they'd either completed all 6 code reforms or they were working on these code reforms. And I think anybody that had completed 3 or 4 of the code reforms and were working on the others got thrown on this map. Really compelling. So there's lots of stories in all these places that show all of those core code reforms. So when your city says, well, who else is doing rear yard cottages? Here's at least 60 representations that you can go to and point to the cities. You could see they're coastal, east, west, north, south, they're Canadian, they're Southern American, they're Eastern, Western American, they're in the mountains, they're in the plains, all over the place. Everybody submitted. You can go to those cities, and I will tell you, all of them are super excited to be part of this map and this work. Of all these cities, of all the ones we did, the one thing that they all struggled with was streamlining the approval process. And what we had described as Strong Towns as streamlining the approval process is that you'd be able to walk into City Hall, and in 24 hours later, you would have a building permit. So you want to build a duplex in a community, 24 hours later, you walk out with a building permit. I talked to lots of zoning officials, the planners of cities, and they said, oh, we can do a zoning approval in 2 minutes. I said, well, what does it take for a building? Well, that they go fast. It may take a couple of days. Okay. I get that with how busy everything is. And then I said, well, what about utilities? Oh, or what about a driveway permit? Oh, and this is what we heard time and time again from all of our incremental developers. And so, Toolkit 2 that we launched is to go through that, to go through all the things that uh, once you are a city and you've gotten to the point where you can say yes to this type of housing, we need to find folks on the sidelines that are willing to go and build. We need to think about all the folks in our community that are willing to convert an extra bedroom to a rental little accessory apartment, or want to do a duplex in the backyard, or they recognize in their community that there's a housing shortage and they could go and convert a single family home to a triplex, all those sorts of pieces. This is what we've released in the toolkit, and we're trying to respond to what we've heard from all of the incremental developers. None of them and who we talked to wanted a handout. What they're asking for is for a fair shot. And if you think about that small scale development, that's not, they're not being provided that. I've looked at many codes. People are super excited. They've gone through a year's exercise of getting a new ADU ordinance for their community. And you go through that ordinance and you realize that they're required to do more things than they would if they just built a single family home. They have to go get neighbor permission. They have to get a zoning variance. They have different setbacks, different performance standards. And my dear friends in Medicine Hat were describing to me that they couldn't figure out how to get utilities to it. So if you wanted to do a detached unit, you'd have to put in a 500-gallon water pressure tank in those units to deal with the utilities. These are all of the barriers that are in that housing toolkit. And as you go through the toolkit and you read through it, we're speaking to local government. We're trying to respond to what we're hearing from elected officials, and we're elevating that voice of folks that are actually sitting on the sidelines that are excited to do investment in your community. And they're just finding that instead of hitting a wall, they're hitting this giant tangle. So as you go through the toolkit, you can download it. I encourage you to share it. This will go out to all anybody on our email list, anybody that's gone to Housing Ready and engaged us on that. All those folks will get a link to that on Monday, and the Housing Ready site will get a little bit of a makeover on that site. I met with lots and lots of folks when the first toolkit came out, lots of cities working through all of those 6 steps. What I'll tell all of you as members is as you're getting in your communities and you're talking through City Hall and you're meeting with developers, if you look at the 3 struggles, the 3 areas that at Strong Towns we're identifying that need to be untangled at City Hall, it's the complexity people see at City Hall when they're doing a development project. We talked to a lot of developers that said they realized after going through multiple redesigns and multiple permit resubmissions, they realized that they asked the wrong question at first. It took them lots of questions to figure out what the first question was, or that they had uncertainty at City Hall where even though everybody at City Hall was super friendly and helped them process their permit, even though the council had said that we want to see a variety of housing types, even though they have the AARP ADU flyers up on all, little cards on the racks. When they actually submitted permits, they found that they felt that they never got the same answer, and they weren't sure that people really wanted them to build in the community that piece. And that's things that I can tell you from working in those departments that cities actually are really good at documentation. We're just really bad at connecting that on a development project, and it gets even more complicated when it goes across different departments. But this is something that, from a city management side, we can deal with. And then the third untangling bit is mistrust, where people just don't trust the system. And we're already in an uphill battle with government. Like, we just accept that. But we also have to recognize that as somebody else sitting on the sidelines that wants to be an investor in your community, that wants to do an addition, wants to take that empty lot or rehab a building. Um, as a first time developer, they they just have a lot of mistrust. And when they go to City Hall, they can see right away within the first few minutes of meeting the very first person at City Hall whether that city is going to be a champion for the project they're moving forward or they're going to be an obstacle and make it very difficult. And I can't tell you how many projects that we all want in our communities that were never done because of that, because the reading of going through the process, again, super friendly people, but they just weren't getting clear pieces forward. So, like I said, I met with lots of folks to talk through the code components. We have lots of really cool people that are doing this all around the country. I'm offering the same when it comes to how do we work on all those soft skills at City Hall? What are the things we can do in our community, especially if we've gone through and you've done 5 or 6 of the code reforms? How do we get those incremental developers going in your community? And there's lots of things people are doing that are inexpensive and with the resources available. It's not another grant program, it's not another department or another new hire. It's really with the resources you have available. I know all of you as members have access to our locomotive sessions this year. Tomorrow, the locomotive session is my opportunity to share the work of one of my really dear friends that's doing incredible stuff in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I have a preview of what Rebecca is going to share in that locomotive session. It's titled, using pre-approved plans. It's in that kind of piece. But what she's really going to show is the hard work that is happening in Kalamazoo of using pre-approved plans to achieve code reform. And then once they achieve code reform, she's now working on aligning City Hall and getting this stuff forward so permits can go out faster, even outside the pre-approved plans. And then the big caveat to that is every project needs financing. And they're doing really innovative things in Kalamazoo, and they're asking lots of good questions to imply more. So I'm excited about that. I know all of you have access to it. If you don't have access to it, drop in the chat. Rachel will give you the code. It's on the member page on our website as well. It's in your member link email. If you can't make the live session, they're recorded, and a few days later they get uploaded to the site, and you can go back and watch it. But for me, Rebecca's a real inspiration. She's somebody I've known a very long time. We both were in school at the same time, and she's somebody that started out as a planner. So she's a recovering architect like myself. Was hired as a planner in the city, and the work that she's done, the patience she has, she's actually been promoted up to the city to the point that she's saying, "No, slow down. I still want to draw. I still want to see projects built forward," which is really impressive. I think anybody that works in City Hall, the planners are usually the first ones that get all the pressure because of a project or a code change. So, real inspiration.
So, yeah, if anyone has questions about housing specifically, go for it. Otherwise, maybe we'll do one of these pre-submitted questions, and I'll make sure to share with Clark, who sent it in, is a brand new Strong Towns member. So, Clark's question: how do you start the conversation with a county commissioner about street safety and walkability in a community that doesn't have a large emphasis on walking and biking, and obviously applicable to any number of elected officials? Um, yeah, Edward, recommendations on starting that conversation when it's not part of the culture.
Yeah, it's really tough. I always try to find common ground in that kind of discussion. So the very first thing, and I think I've repeated it, many of you have heard this before, but actually walking into City Hall and meeting with those commissioners, meeting with staff, like if you're a citizen, meet with those folks. You would be surprised how few calls that of constituents some of our elected officials receive. And usually the calls are so heated that it's like there's nothing we can do with it. But a legitimate citizen that is concerned or passionate about something in the community, it's worth meeting with those elected and appointed officials and sharing a lot of information. Um, so that's the first thing to go through that piece. The other thing that I share from my own town here is get your elected officials, get people and these appointed board members, get them out in the city. I can't tell you how many technical staff and public works directors I've met and city engineers that have never walked or observed the intersections and roadways that they're managing, designing, and building. They just get so busy, they don't have the excuse. They may have all these excuses of why they can't get out there. Um, what they started doing in my town, which I thought was like really, really cool, and I will take some credit and encourage them to do this, is they saw this idea of a walking audit. And my town has lots and lots of meetings and committees, and like that's where everything goes to get encumbered and die. Um, so they couldn't just do a walking audit. So they came up with this idea of doing walks about nothing. And simply what it is it's like because it's walks about nothing, there's no agenda, nobody's responsible for it. It's just at a regular time. I think we do it every week or every other week in the city, and like just walking around. There are so many observations that occur on those walks that you could never convey in public comment or in a letter or a 311 complaint to the city. So, engaging folks to go out there and see those things. The other things that are out there are the engagement of the bike buses, getting a collaboration of folks together doing the same thing. So making some of this stuff more normal, getting those pieces out there. So definitely talking, definitely observing. If you look at the Beyond Blame toolkit, that the report, Beyond Blame report, and the information we have on the Crash Analysis Studio, that's another really good tool. That is something that gives you an excuse to go to an elected official or technical staff and say, hey, here's this big national organization that has identified that lots of lots of streets were thinking about crashes the wrong way. We're thinking about how our dangerous streets are, and in fact, there are things that other cities are doing to make their streets safer, cheaply and quickly. And guess what? We're not the only ones. Look at all those crashes. They look like many of the crashes we've had in our own community. Here's an approach of something we can do. And as a strong citizen, it's not just tossing those ideas out and talking about that stuff, but also be willing to host these things. Hey, Commissioner, if you think this is a good idea, I would love to host a crash studio on either a dangerous street or one of these horrific crashes that occurred in our community. And the only commitment I want is that when I do the report, we'll get it in front of the board. We'll get it into the public record and shared publicly once we do it. Or you'll share it on your LinkedIn or your monthly newsletter that this is happening. Or I want to do walks about nothing. There's some other crazy strong towns people in town that I've started to meet with. If we do that, will you make a commitment to come hang out with us for one of those? These are the sorts of things. That's how I would start that conversation through that. That starts to humanize and bring down the level a lot of complex issues by bringing some of the emotional pieces to it. Once you get in the door and they want to talk technical stuff and you're not comfortable with that, reach out. Reach out. We'd love to help with that. Or, anybody on this call has all that stuff too. Introducing those ideas from a technical side. Um, but getting the desire out there to talk about this stuff, just shifting that conversation, that's what that's what I would suggest. I know that many of you on this call are doing that type of stuff. I mean, my gosh, Danny's doing incredible stuff out in California. He's getting stop signs put in where they need to go and bushes trimmed. Um, so there's just a lot of you out there doing incredible things, and it's that starting a conversation, introducing yourself, and really keeping that on the positive, and providing tools in front of folks that they can actually go and do things with.
And I would hope, like Kelly, I saw your comment that, yeah, just sending so much info to people who are really busy in elected office or like potentially in like a part-time position. Yeah, it can be overwhelming and you worry that they just ignore you or they don't have the time. Hopefully, giving them a different option, like, hey, let's go for a walk, maybe is more appealing than just, a big email or something. But that's
And,
the
and
hope.
doing the stuff of like showing up at council meetings and showing up at whenever these plans occur and just providing positive feedback about what you like about your community. building that rapport up in your community that you're the one that's not showing up to the meetings to complain. You're the one that is pointing out the really good things in our community. When these discussions occur, you're that breath of fresh air. Oh, yeah, this doesn't look right. I heard last week from Kelly that she really liked Main and First Street, and that crossing was really nice, and we just did some work there. How can we make this not so nice thing look like that? Or here's a street that people like in the community, and they pointed out they liked it because it had street trees and wide sidewalks, and the cars drove slower. Like, oh, we're not seeing slow cars here. Why is this street different? Well, there are no trees and the sidewalks are really narrow. Could that be the piece? So we can incrementally bring people aware of what works and what doesn't without overloading them with bunches of reports and lots of complaints. It's really it takes a lot of hard work, but that's what we're in for in the work that we do.
Okay, Thomas asked a couple questions. Is there a guide somewhere for ways to easily approximate the cost of infrastructure, speed bumps, bollards? I know we get asked for this sometimes, or like an entire new road. Edward,
Yeah. It varies in every single state you're in.
yeah, it's so variable.
What I can tell you is the Public Works Department, their porn magazine comes from Mr. Barricade and like Bollards USA. They get like 3 or 4 magazines that show all of these different really temporary features. The trick that Chuck and I use on the road when we talk in cities is that we might not know what is readily available and what is cheap and quickly deployable in a community. But everywhere we go, everybody seems to agree universally that straw bales and tires are things that are like readily available, super cheap, and definitely temporary. And when we start a conversation, in some cities, we'll start a conversation and it'll inspire folks to do that work um, using those really temporary features. If you look, we shared the incredible work that Strong Towns Arcadia did. They did a traffic calming pop up. And if you look at all the materials, it was like really cheap things that sit around construction sites and public works departments. When we go and say use straw bales and tires, the pushback we get is not the implementation of that, it's the material choice. And it's usually from the public works director or the city engineer. And they say, oh, no. We don't use straw bales. That's not a whatever certified green book tool. We actually have the number 12 white bollard delineators, or we have the temporary rubber curbing that we use, and we use it on the street. Now we made like that is an inroad. Now we've moved past that discussion of like, can we do it to what can we do and what materials are available, and people fill that stuff in. I know so that's how you can kind of like start that basic conversation of finding out what's readily available. And when you start talking to municipal staff, you start asking what are things that could be done like in the next week or the next couple of days. And a lot of the things too, I take lots of pictures of farmers markets and festivals and parades. And I don't take the pictures of the parades. It's as I approach them and the streets are closed and there's barricades and cones and all different types of creative things that we use for those. It's asking to use those in those pieces. Um, but yeah, like looking through those prices of stuff, you can find it. All the State Department highway offices have that. All the cities can say that. Once you find the price, share it broadly. Um, and for Australia, there is an incredible group. And I need to look it up. That is actually doing this work with all temporary stuff. And my mind this is um, I'll find it as we're talking.
I know Thomas also had another question. What's the best way to work with city planners? My local elected councilors are enthusiastic about small scale developments, but officers and planners are generally against it. Okay, interesting. Edward, is that something you've encountered?
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's really important to again meet these folks in these different um, roles. Folks that are planners that are working on this. This is they've decided to make this their professional career. They've gone to school for it. They've been certified for it, so they take this very seriously. And if they don't, they're not the right person. And like you would realize that immediately. But I can tell you, 9 times out of 10, these are all folks that care deeply about the community. It's important to go and sit and talk with them when they're not on the microphone and not on the record. It's really important to walk through those pieces. Um, it's important to ask them what is working and what's not working, and to go through and look at development projects that are coming through. It's important to ask them about the process. So, not the height limits, not the parking stuff, but what is the process? What process do people have to go through this um, to learn how the system works? And then nobody in local government is so adverse to conflict and they're so adverse to failure that rarely the ones that survive do they ever go and do something that is out of the box or innovative. It just like we just don't allow that, and we should. So if you find an innovative person, elevate them, reinforce that work. When they do something innovative, even if it's just a small little ember, they made a report a little bit shorter or a little easier to read. Like you scale it up to where it's at, or they're pushing to reform parking in your community. It's really important as strong citizens for us to reinforce and support that work. So get 4 or 5 friends, even if they're all your family members, to show up for public comment and support that work. Explain why it's important. Help defend those pieces. Send in public comment related to that. That's really important. Yeah, Barbara, you raised your hand.
Just two thoughts as I listen to this. One is even local politics is really confrontational these days. And I'll tell you, your local people just don't need another big mouth, uh, 2-year-old temper tantrum in their office, right? And we just get a lot of that. So coming in, I think as you talk with less criticism and more, uh, this is what's good first, getting a good relationship is going to be really important. We just don't need to throw water on the political fires we don't need to throw gasoline on the political fires that are going these days. We really don't. The other thing I think that I've noticed with the professional people, and I can say it from my age, we spent a lot of years learning our profession, moving ahead in it, and we had to toe the line with what the PE organization said, what the schools said, right? Even when we looked at it and didn't agree with it, often it was your career to point out the stark naked emperors sitting around in your projects. So I think your point about doing this offline, not doing it in public, getting getting a good relation, and sometimes what I've found with people is that they feel like their life's work was wrong when they see it. It's like, oh my God, I've done harm, and real professionals hurt when they realize that what they've done in the past has been a bad thing and has not been the helpful thing that they tell themselves that they're doing. Right. So have a lot of empathy for that. Try and be maybe less critical and more allowing them to see it for themselves. I'll tell you, when you see one, you can't unsee it. Even if, as the old saying is, even if your salary depends on not knowing it, uh, this walk around um, the crash analyses. Once you see one, you can't unsee it. But we don't want to put them into that psychological space of uh, becoming a bad person, right? And so it's really important that we have some empathy there.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's not a comfortable place to be in City Hall in many cities across the country. And really working, I'll tell you my own experience working in City Hall. I had my own Jane Jacobs in every community I worked in. These are the people that were relentless in trying to get good things done in their community. Um, my perspective reading through Jane Jacobs after being in City Hall, that's a force I never wanted to confront when I was like, I never wanted to be in New York City and have a Jane Jacobs writing against me in everything I was doing. But what I found is by communicating to folks offline, meeting with folks, especially in smaller communities, many of the folks that were applying for building permits were people that my kids played with. Or we sat in the same pew on Sunday mornings. So trying to work through and explain those pieces and trying to help them understand the process and where policy is, where the controls I would have as a planning director on these pieces or a building official, like really working through that and informing them. Once they started to understand the process, then they had the ability, when I would see something coming on the pipe that was not the right thing and that my council wanted to say no to, but the only people showing up were the people the developer had brought. It was important for me to communicate and say, hey, Johnny, this would be a great night for you to show up, or, this is something that you said you don't like. The council's under a lot of pressure. You should write a letter or call your council member so they know that they're not alone on that. And it's really working through that. And that's just communicating from the get-go on all these sorts of projects. And I always told developers that came into my office that we were going to have an open line of communication as your plan reviewer. So if I didn't think you had the votes or I thought there was something controversial for it or I received a bunch of citizen complaints, I was going to tell you. I was going to tell the developer this is what you're confronting. I was also going to share contact information from both the folks that are upset about a project and the folks doing the project so they could get together. And they didn't need to meet at City Hall or in my office, but the development community really knew that they needed to make the phone call and talk to the folks that were concerned about these projects and listen to them. Um, they needed to do that. Now, the ones that didn't do it ended up in a lot of trouble because um, you could see that they had been given the public's contact information, refused to meet with the public, and that led to a different direction. But even in the most tense ones that were split votes, knowing that all voices were heard and could contribute was really important. So don't blame the staff. I will tell you, staff is way easier to get rid of than it is to write a new ordinance. And I see that time and time again in cities all across America. Really understand that elected officials set policy. They're setting the direction of the ship. How the ship is running falls under the guise of the ordinances, and the ordinances are administered by that technical staff at City Hall. And we need to understand all of those pieces to it. So if you don't like a portion of the code because it doesn't do something you want, don't attack the planner or the city staff. That's easy. That doesn't actually change the ordinance. Working with the planning staff to identify that, asking them why is a dump project coming forward? Why does this have a sea of parking? And the planner says, well, because Article 12 of parking says they need to have 12 more spaces than anybody thinks they need. This needs to change. I'm going to make a staff recommendation. It needs to change because we don't like it in this project. But you as a citizen should also do that. And all of our elected officials, you should talk to them to identify that we need a policy shift.
Hi, it's been a couple of weeks since I've been able to drop in. I was on vacation, and I came back to the last round of public consultation on the rezoning of the city of Ottawa. This is the third round of public consultation, and people are getting quite fed up uh, with consultations that don't get reflected in the next draft. Most of their comments aren't being addressed. If they're being addressed at all, is just being a kind of a parroted back, but no real answers. And so people, I'm trying to fight cynicism and disillusionment, trying to get people keep up their spirits and make one final stab, because there are a lot of folks who are enthusiastic about the changes, but there's also a lot who are antagonistic, and I want to give both sides a chance to stay enthusiastic. So I asked the chair of the planning committee if he would host an informal dress rehearsal where people could get their 5 minutes to delegate to a pretend committee and get some feedback on their delegations. But I'm expecting that that's likely not going to be without problems. And I just wanted your ideas on what could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, I would do it at City Hall. I
No,
would
no,
pull.
it'll be at City Hall. They were going to give it. He was suggesting the council chamber, but that's too big. I couldn't fill that with people. I could fill the
But
committee chamber, so
but
I'm doing it at City Hall in the committee room.
I I believe in the fact of getting people the opportunity to practice, to get up, to share their voice. Doing it at City Hall becomes more complicated because now it's like, is this part of the engagement process that they're doing? Is there any responsibility of staff on this or elected officials to listen to it?
No, no, it's not. The staff don't have the time. Quite frankly, they're busy dealing with all of the official delegations that they have to hear. So this is going to be offline, and it's not even going to be all the councillors on the committee. It'll just be those who are interested.
Yeah. So that's the type of stuff that people should do. They should organize, they should get together, they should practice. Very few folks go and do public speaking, let alone their 2 to 3 minutes of public comment. Those sorts of organizations of letter writing and and really focusing on the key elements that you're supportive of or have a disagreement on. That's all really important. That's stuff that any of us could do. We could set that up at any location, anywhere in our community that's easy for people to get to. We can set that at any time of the day, any day of the week, and we should be doing that. And I know I don't have the
Does it ever backfire? Does it ever have a counter effect?
it it could everything could. If it's at City Hall, it could. If it's somehow linked to something that occurred at City Hall or a favor or some opening that an elected official did, all that adds to the drama that people like to gnaw on. But if it's at like a local conversation is meeting and talking about this stuff, or an organized citizen group is getting to work through this because this is important, that how can that backfire? That's citizens doing citizen work. That's coming together. It's an opportunity for you to hear each other. And for those sessions, you should invite somebody that's opposed to this, and you should talk through it in a sensible way, just and go through and of 80-page
Yeah,
ordinance.
that's my challenge is to get people. That's my challenge is to get people who have.
Yeah, and so just sharing that you're doing that. Now, this is hard to do overnight. This is stuff that takes lots of time coming together because usually the folks and I'm guilty of it, usually the folks that show up to the meetings are always get labeled the troublemaker, or they're the people who already made the public comment. So now that you're going to be associated with them, and we lose sight on really what we're doing. So the hard work is to go out there to be very clear on the things like the mission statement for strong towns. It is broad but also direct. That allows us to open the door for lots of folks to come in to talk about things. When we talk about wanting to change our development pattern, that's a lot of different things that come into it. And we could talk about parking and land use and highway expansion, all of those different things without being critical of each other, but critical of the policies and the approaches and how we got there. And we can start to build coalitions for the highway widening people, understand that there is a relationship to incremental housing in that talk that has interest of pulling people together, building that coalition up. So you should meet, you should do that. Even if only one person shows up, that is a success. You're working to pull that together. We have a strong town speaker group that gets together every couple of weeks. It used to be a Toastmasters group, but we don't. We've lost the Toastmaster status because it costs a lot and it takes a lot of energy to keep that up. But the same Toastmaster approach is what we're doing. That's another resource. Again, building this stuff up. If you all are working on how to do speaking at public engagement or sharing things that are important to you in your community. That's what this group is doing. Norm shows up to a bunch of those, and yeah, the speech club. That is the opportunity to do that. And I think the next one is Norm explained it to me, is that they're taking on different roles of who's speaking in a meeting to go through and do that. So that's another tool too that you can share out to a group of folks so that you can feel comfortable at the podium, you're not getting emotional, you're not jumping into attacks, and you can really like getting groups together. I know our Albuquerque local conversation have been working really hard this last year on housing reform. They they supported as a local conversation some housing reform that was highly political. They didn't know it was highly political until it passed, and they were the group that advocated, one of the three groups that advocated for housing reform, all really important policies, poorly kind of implemented throughout the city, but it was an advancement forward. They've taken, if you go to their social media page, you can see they've taken the last like 6 or 8 months of educating the public, building a coalition of folks that are getting together regularly, talking about housing. And as different items come forward in front of the council, they now have a group of informed citizens. Even the folks that are totally opposed to rear yard cottages or increases in density and all that stuff are showing up at these meetings, and they can all agree to disagree, but they can also agree on certain parts of these ordinances moving forward that need to be put in place. And building that up, that builds that credibility across the community. Their meetings now, I think, have 50 or 60 people that show up. I mean, it's really amazing how many people show up. Um, so working through that, and it's being humble. It's a lot of listening. It's a lot of sharing and ideas, and really boiling down to the key core elements that need to move forward. Yeah, Barbara.
Um, the comment about can doing some of this get backlash? We've had more and more problems locally with developer money in the local politics, the county and the town and such. And in a couple of cases, it's absolutely clear that they bought uh, a particular councilman or a particular county supervisor. We've even had the problem of folks being on the payroll of the developer and not recusing themselves from votes, right? So the more you show them your cards, the more the developers can push back. So we have, it's I'm in the Midwest and it's becoming a serious problem here of just plain uh, I'd have to say corruption, right? There's just no two words about it. So get to know who's buying whom before you wade into some of this. Because one of the things we've also found, besides having their own staff pack the committee meetings and stuff, they're also giving what I would call bribes of all sorts to folks to come up and support it, and then with no real honesty behind it. They're just there because someone has uh, talked them into being there, which is a really bad situation to be in. So we're losing some of that objective. What do the people want? So keep an eye out for that. It's not pretty.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to speak directly to what you're saying, give you a slight different version of what I've run into the past year. And this has to do with developers and gifting to the city, and not directly through what they are looking to get permitting for, but through giving nice things to the city that are separate. But if those of us that follow everything, we see the connection. And I started saying, how can you, isn't, because they start every city council meeting with, you have a conflict of interest or appearance of fairness. Well, then they have explained to me how they have defined what they need, how they answer that so tightly that they're okay saying, no, I don't, when I'm going, yeah, but the
Yeah,
public.
it's not a bribe, right? I mean,
Sure, sure.
we're having that happen too, particularly with smaller towns where they can afford on a large project to give a huge bribe.
Right. Well, and so here's the deal. I started looking around because this just doesn't make. I focused on this whole thing about how do I better explain how the public sees conflict of interest for one thing, and so I, thanks to just googling, I found where there are cities, because I knew it had to be out there, that have policies that prohibit get. And I found that Rancho Palos Verdes in LA and also Minneapolis, just two examples, have very clear policies where they state that if somebody, whether it's an individual or a developer, are in the process of needing something, getting permission from the city is not allowed to accept any donations of any type from that person for like 18 months prior to the application and 18 months after maybe they're accepted. So after a year of being ignored, I now found out that after having explained this umpteenth time recently, there's a good chance that they're going to workshop it about changing and adding a policy for our city. So there's what I'm directly involved with, like with you.
What I can say is everything you put out there and you share in the public on your social media sites and getting people together, somebody will always want to twist that. But the thing is that all of our game plans, if we stick true to all the Strong Towns principles, our approach here is to make our town stronger and more resilient. That everything that we're doing, we're being very authentic in that, in the approach and discussion. It's funny when I talk to elected leaders in communities where our local conversations are being active. And maybe these elected leaders are just hearing about strong towns for the first time. And we start talking about them, talking to them about an event, or they've read one of our articles, or we want to highlight some work they're doing. And they always mention, they're like, oh, yeah, that local conversation group, they're, they're resilient and consistent in everything that they say. They are constant in their approach about how are wanting to make sure our town is the best town it could be. And I hear that time and time again. It comes out in kind of rough and convoluted ways, but that's the only way we can do that. And if you have a city that's dealing with that kind of impropriety, it's just a matter of time before that rot gets to the core and eventually gets changed out. It may be the next election. It may be the next time that if they're doing that type of backroom deal, that's not the only type of bad stuff they're doing in their lives. Something will catch up with them. But we can all work at our own local level and control the things that we can control. And if we are consistent in our message, if we're consistent to share what we like about our communities and we stay positive on those pieces, we're going to have a seat at the table, and we're going to others will be attracted to us. It's really easy. You'll see a lot of other groups out there. It's really easy to be the one that throws oil on the flame, to be the inflammatory, to be that negative group. That's really easy, but that has a very short shelf life. The thing that has a longer shelf life are the people that are always there at all the meetings, that care deeply about the community, that are giving back to the community. Anytime something needs done, you're at the ready to help with that. Anytime that you identify a problem in the community, your request to the city is not for the city to do it, but can I have permission? Is it all right if I do it? I might need a little help. Is there any way you can help me on it? That's the stuff that really moves this forward and makes a much better place that we all want to live in. I found for our friends in Australia and anybody else that's really interested in people doing incredible work, the town team movement in Australia is doing incredible stuff when it comes to safe and productive streets. So the idea of technical urbanism and doing little pop up safety improvements on streets, they have actually created a program that is supported by the insurance, the auto insurance industry, to go into cities and to do those types of projects. So they do kind of a version of what we would do in a crash studio, identify contributing factors, identify what they can do an incredible party to put stuff in, and then teach people about why we're putting the traffic calming in. So that's a great group. They've sent me some incredible stories of the work they're doing, and so if I was in Australia, I would reach out to them. They also have some free courses on that, and they could tell you exactly what it costs for all the projects they do because uh, they have national funding that's coming through to support their work.
Any final questions? Otherwise, I'll throw in this one from that someone pre-submitted. Someone named John. Are there many signs that states are taking more responsibility for their infrastructure, or are they still waiting to be rescued by federal money? I ask because it's not obvious that our debt is slashing our options for that to happen. Edward, any good news on this front?
There's never any good news on this because we've built more than we can maintain.
Yeah.
The signs that I'm seeing, it's starting with transit right now around the country. A lot of cities are cutting their subsidies for transit, and they're having to become more creative with that. Many of the cities are looking towards the federal government for the whatever the next policy will be that will come down. Um, we're doing a lot of thinking here at Strong Towns about. Well, you can read any of our articles about our thoughts on the uh, Federal Highway Trust Fund. It's been bankrupt for a very long time, and I'm not sure that there is all of the political support to continue to prop that up. There's no more money to put into it, and I don't think people are willing to pay what it really would pay to keep that going. So, at a state level, there's some shining hope out there of where cities or states are beginning to think a little bit differently, but they're still caught in the cycle because it is such a big trap that they're in. The backlog, the amount of projects that have come out, the amount of funding that has gone for those things, um, the amount of maintenance, the only way they can maintain is by expanding. And that is the cycle we're in. It's going to take a long time to unwind that.
And expect more articles, conversation on this particular topic, the highway spending, highway trust fund, all that. We've got a lot more coming soon.
If anybody knows of anything that they've seen in their states that's like, oh, my state's thinking about it differently, um, send it to Rachel or myself. We would love to see that and
Love
learn.
some good news. Yeah.
Yeah, but right now the backlog. Go to we can go to any of the national engineering reports. The backlog continues to grow despite how much money we put into it. Um, and until states start thinking about that differently, then that just won't happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gene, true.
Yeah.
Before we close, I wanted to just give a save the date on continuing this conversation about the housing toolkit. We will have a conversation with Chuck on October 20th at 2:30 Central. We don't have the link ready yet, but we'll be sending that out in your member email on Tuesdays, probably for sure by next Tuesday. And yeah, so just mark your calendar for that. That's going to be an ongoing conversation, kind of giving people a summary of that toolkit. And we're really aiming it at elected officials and city leaders. So if that's you, great. If that's not you, you're still welcome to come. But we'll especially encourage you to invite an elected official or city leader or share the recording afterwards, as we've been talking about. They're busy people, but we hope that they will be able to join, because that is particularly the intended audience for that toolkit, is really how can our city leaders take this, put it into action to really create a culture and a groundswell for more incremental housing to happen. So
And
that
if your
is
city,
April
if
20th,
you're
Tuesday.
talking to your elected officials and your city is moving forward on this, so they want to learn more, and you really think you're on that cusp of change, let us know. Reach out. Chuck and I would love to come to your community and walk through that toolkit, host a workshop or an event to help get over that hump. We'd love to introduce you to our friends at Incremental Development Alliance or Neighbor Evolution that are doing that incremental development training. And we'd love to provide those resources and get that on the ground. Uh, this is really, we're at a housing crisis, and we keep saying it, and I will repeat it because we cannot say it enough. All of our cities have the ability to heal our housing markets. And if you're serious about that, we want to help you get there.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with us on your Wednesday, bringing your questions and your insights. Always appreciate it. See you next Wednesday if you're able to join us. Yeah, and do keep in touch if you've got updates, if you've got questions. We're here. All right. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Edward, as always. Take care.